I came home from work on a Tuesday afternoon and found a bright red stop work order taped to the retaining wall in my backyard. Not placed gently, not tucked under the gate, taped right in the center of the new concrete blocks, where every neighbor behind me could see it. The notice said the wall violated county setback requirements, had no valid permit on file, created an unsafe drainage condition, and had to be corrected or removed within 10 days. At the bottom, in bold letters, it said the property owner was responsible for all penalties, engineering review costs, and possible demolition. I stood there with my lunch bag still in my hand, staring at a wall I had paid a licensed contractor to build because I thought I was doing everything the right way. Then I heard his truck pull up. My contractor walked through the side gate like he owned the place, followed by two workers and one of the HOA board members carrying a clipboard. He did not look embarrassed. He did not apologize. He pointed at the red tag and said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "This is what happens when homeowners want to cut corners." For a second, I thought I had misheard him. Then he kept going. He told the HOA board member that I had rushed the job, refused to wait for permits, and demanded the cheapest possible build. He said he had warned me. He said I had ignored him. He said he had emails and paperwork proving I had accepted responsibility for the permit myself. The HOA board member turned to me like I was already guilty and told me the association would be issuing daily fines if the wall stayed up. She said I had put nearby homes at risk. She said the board might require full removal and restoration of the slope at my expense. Behind the fence, my rear neighbor was filming with his phone, and my contractor just stood there, arms crossed, acting like the disaster in my backyard had nothing to do with him. Then he leaned closer and said, almost under his breath, "You can either pay me to fix this, or you can let the county make it a lot more expensive." That was the moment I stopped trying to defend myself out loud. Because while he was talking, I was looking at the photocopy of the permit he had given me 2 weeks earlier. The permit number printed on that page did not match the number in his original email. And when I noticed that, my fear turned into something else. Something quieter, something much more dangerous for him. Before all of this happened, I was not the kind of person who argued with contractors, challenged the HOA, or spent my evenings reading county building codes. I was just trying to take care of the house my parents had left behind. It was a modest one-story home at the edge of a quiet HOA neighborhood, the kind of place where everyone waved from their driveways but still noticed if your trash cans stayed out too long. My father bought that house when I was in high school. He worked double shifts for years, and my mother treated the backyard like it was her own little sanctuary. She planted hydrangeas along the fence, kept a row of clay pots near the patio, and always said the slope behind the house gave the yard character. After my father passed, I could have sold the place. A few relatives even told me I should. The market was good, the house needed maintenance, and I was busy enough with my own life. But every time I stood in that backyard, I remembered my dad repairing the old wooden gate on Sunday mornings, and my mom kneeling in the dirt with garden gloves on, humming like the whole world was peaceful. So I stayed. The only real problem was the slope. Every heavy rain pushed water toward the back corner of the property. Mud gathered near the fence line. The soil under the old flower beds started washing away. One spring storm left a shallow channel running straight toward the foundation, and that was when I knew I had to do something before a small issue turned into a very expensive one. I did what any careful homeowner would do. I looked for a licensed contractor. I asked about insurance. I asked whether a retaining wall needed a permit. I asked whether the HOA had to approve it before construction started. The contractor I hired acted like those questions were almost insulting. He told me he handled retaining walls all the time. He said he knew the county inspectors by name. He said HOA approvals were routine, and homeowners only got in trouble when they tried to manage projects themselves. He even said, "The safest thing you can do is let me handle the paperwork." That was exactly what I wanted to hear. I was not trying to beat the system. I was not trying to save money by skipping permits. I wanted the wall built correctly, inspected properly, and approved by everyone who needed to approve it. I wanted a stable backyard, a protected foundation, and a place where I could replant my mother's flowers without worrying that the next storm would wash them into the neighbor's yard. The contract looked professional. It had his license number, his company logo, payment schedule, material list, and a line that said he was responsible for permits, unless otherwise stated in writing. I remember seeing that sentence and feeling relieved, because to me, it meant I had hired someone who knew what he was doing. Looking back, that single line may have been the most important sentence in the entire document, because when everything fell apart, when the red tag appeared, when the HOA treated me like I had endangered the neighborhood, and when my contractor tried to make me the villain in my own backyard, that line became the first crack in his story. And if you have ever trusted a professional because they sounded confident, only to realize later that confidence can be used like a weapon, then you understand why I kept every email, every invoice, and every message. Share your thoughts in the comments, because sometimes the most ordinary homeowner only learns how serious property rights are after someone else tries to rewrite the truth for them. The first few days of construction looked normal enough to me. A small crew showed up early in the morning, unloaded blocks near the side yard, and started digging along the back slope. My contractor walked around with a coffee in his hand, pointing at different spots like he had the whole project mapped out in his head. He talked with the confidence of someone who expected everyone around him to simply trust him. And I did, at least at first. He told me the wall would be clean, strong, and fully compliant. He said the drainage system would keep water from collecting behind the blocks. He said the county liked seeing simple residential projects handled by experienced contractors because it made inspections easy. Every time I asked whether the permit had officially cleared, he gave me the same calm answer. "Don't worry, I've got it handled." Those words became a kind of trap. By the third day, I noticed the gravel pile looked smaller than I expected. The contract mentioned crushed stone backfill and drainage pipe, but most of what I saw behind the wall looked like the same soil they had just dug out of the slope. When I asked one of the workers whether more gravel was coming, he glanced toward the street before answering. Then he said I would have to ask the boss. So I did. My contractor laughed like I had asked the dumbest question in the world. He told me homeowners always read one sentence online and suddenly think they understand construction. He said every yard was different, and too much gravel could create more movement, not less. I did not know enough to argue with him, so I backed off. That is something I regretted later, not because I was wrong to ask, but because he made me feel embarrassed for caring about my own property. A few days after that, it rained. Not a huge storm, just one of those steady spring rains that lasts long enough to test every weak spot in a yard. The next morning, my rear neighbor knocked on my door before I had even finished my coffee. He was angry, and at first I thought he was overreacting. Then I walked around back and saw the muddy water. A brown trail had pushed through the construction area, slipped under a temporary gap near the fence, and washed into his lawn. It had left streaks across his mulch bed and collected near the base of one of his small trees. He pointed at it and said, "Your wall is already failing, and it isn't even finished." I apologized because I truly felt bad. I told him the contractor was supposed to be handling drainage and inspection. My neighbor just shook his head and said, "Then you better make sure he actually is." That same afternoon, the HOA sent me a warning letter. The email said the board had received a complaint about runoff, unapproved exterior construction, and possible damage to a neighboring property. It said I had 48 hours to provide proof of approval and permit compliance. I forwarded the email to my contractor immediately. He called me 10 minutes later, irritated. Not concerned, not professional, irritated. He said the HOA loved making everything dramatic. He said my neighbor was probably trying to get free landscaping out of me. Then he told me not to respond to the board directly, because homeowners always make it worse when they try to explain technical issues. I asked him again for the permit confirmation. That was when he sent me a PDF. It had a permit number, a county logo, an issue date, and a project description that mentioned a residential retaining wall. I remember feeling a wave of relief when I opened it. It looked official enough to someone like me. It looked like the kind of document a normal person would accept because they had no reason to believe their own contractor would hand them something false. So I sent it to the HOA. For one brief moment, I thought the problem was contained. Then the county inspector came out. He arrived 2 days later in a white truck with the county seal on the door. My contractor was not there yet, even though he knew the inspection was scheduled. The inspector walked the length of the wall, looked behind the blocks, checked the distance from the fence, and asked me for the permit number. I gave him the PDF on my phone. He stared at it for a long moment without saying anything. Then he looked at the wall again and said, "This permit is not coming up under your address. At first, I thought it was a clerical issue. Maybe the system had not updated. Maybe I had the wrong number. Maybe there was some innocent explanation." I told him my contractor had handled the paperwork and sent me the document himself. The inspector's expression did not change. He took a few more photos. He measured the height from the lower grade. He checked the slope behind the wall. He looked at the drainage outlet, or what was supposed to be the drainage outlet, and then he wrote something on his tablet. Within 15 minutes, a red stop work order was taped to my wall. That was when my contractor finally arrived. He stepped out of his truck, saw the inspector, saw the red tag, and immediately became a different person. The friendly expert disappeared. The man who had promised to handle everything was suddenly loud, defensive, and strangely prepared. He told the inspector I had been warned. He said I had asked him to start early because I was worried about the rainy season. He said I had decided to take care of the permit separately to save time. Then he looked at me, right in front of the inspector, and said, "You told me you didn't want delays. Don't put this on me now." I felt my face go hot. I told him that was not true. I reminded him the contract said he was responsible for permits. I reminded him he had told me not to contact the HOA or county because he was handling everything. He shrugged. Then he pulled a folded paper from his truck and handed it to the inspector. It was a change order. According to that document, I had supposedly agreed to take responsibility for permit filing, HOA coordination, drainage approval, and any correction required by the county. At the bottom was a signature that looked like mine. For a few seconds, I could not even speak. The inspector did not accuse me of anything. He simply said the stop work order remained in effect until the permit issue, engineering requirements, setback concerns, and drainage violations were resolved. But my contractor kept talking over him, making sure everyone nearby heard his version. By then, 2 neighbors were watching from behind their fences. The HOA board member, who lived 3 houses down, had come outside with her phone in her hand. My contractor raised his voice and said, "This is exactly why I tell people not to cut corners. Now the county thinks I built an illegal wall because the homeowner wanted it cheap." That sentence was designed to humiliate me, and it worked, for about 10 minutes. Then something inside me went still. I realized arguing with him in the yard would only help him. He was louder. He was more experienced at sounding confident. He knew how to talk around technical words and make himself look like the professional in the room. If I tried to fight him with emotion, he would bury me under excuses. So I stopped. I took photos of the red tag. I saved the HOA email. I forwarded the permit PDF to my personal account. I asked the inspector for a copy of his notes, and when my contractor leaned close enough for only me to hear and said, "You can either pay me to fix this, or you can let the county make it worse," I did not answer him. I just looked past him at the corner of my roof, at the small black security camera pointed directly over the backyard, because the night before the inspection, that same camera had recorded headlights in my side yard after dark. At the time, I assumed it was one of the workers picking up a tool. But now, watching my contractor wave that suspicious change order around like he had been waiting for this exact moment, I knew I needed to see what had really happened. And when I opened the camera footage that night, the first thing I saw was my contractor walking through my gate long after sunset, carrying a folder under his arm. That night I did not sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, the red stop work order beside me, and the contractor's so-called change order lying flat under the overhead light. Outside, the backyard was dark except for the small security light near the patio, shining over the unfinished wall like a spotlight on a crime scene. For hours I kept hearing his voice in my head. "You told me you didn't want delays. Don't put this on me now. You can either pay me to fix this or let the county make it worse." The old version of me would have panicked. I would have called him back, begged him to explain, maybe even agreed to pay more just to make the problem disappear. That was what he was counting on. He thought if he scared me enough with fines, inspectors, HOA letters, and legal language, I would hand him another check before I understood what had really happened. But I had one thing he did not know about: the camera. It was not an expensive system, just a simple motion-activated security camera I installed after a package was stolen from my porch the year before. One camera covered the front walkway, one covered the driveway, and one, mounted under the back corner of the roof, pointed across the patio, side gate, and the entire construction area. I opened the app and started scrolling through the recordings. At first, it was exactly what I expected. Workers arriving in the morning, blocks being unloaded, my contractor walking around with his phone pressed to his ear, the crew digging, stacking, covering materials with plastic, then leaving before sunset. Then I found the clip from the night before the inspection. The timestamp was 8:47 p.m., headlights swept across my side fence, a truck door closed softly. Then my contractor appeared at the gate, using the temporary latch the workers had installed during construction. He did not knock. He did not text me. He did not have permission to enter my backyard after hours. He walked straight to the wall with a folder under his arm. For almost 2 minutes, he moved through the construction area with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where everything was. He pulled back the plastic sheeting near the drainage trench. He picked up a short section of black corrugated pipe, looked at it, and tossed it toward the material pile. Then he crouched near the side of the wall, where the inspector later said drainage was missing. The camera did not capture every detail, because part of the wall blocked the view. But it captured enough. He was there after dark, alone, touching the work area, moving materials, and he never told me. Then the audio picked up something even worse. It was faint, but clear enough. He was on the phone with someone, probably one of his workers. I turned up the volume and played it again. He said, "Don't worry about the permit. I'll clean that up tomorrow if they ask." I froze. I played it again, then again. That one sentence changed everything. I downloaded the clip immediately. Then I backed it up to a cloud folder, emailed it to myself, and saved a copy on an external drive. I had no idea yet whether it would matter legally, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done trusting anything that man said without proof. After that, I stopped thinking like a frightened homeowner and started thinking like someone building a file. I made a folder on my desktop and named it Retaining Wall Evidence. Inside it, I created subfolders for contract, invoices, emails, HOA, county, photos, video, and contractor license. It felt excessive at first, almost paranoid, but every document I saved made the story clearer. The original contract was first. I found the signed PDF from the day I hired him. His company logo was at the top. His license number was printed near the payment terms. The scope of work described a residential retaining wall with proper drainage, gravel backfill, and county-compliant installation. And there it was, the line I had barely noticed before. Contractor responsible for all permits, unless otherwise stated in writing. I read that sentence over and over, unless otherwise stated in writing. That was why the change order mattered so much. He needed that fake-looking page to override the original contract. Without it, his story collapsed before it even reached the HOA, so I opened the change order again. The layout looked different from the contract. The font was slightly off, the margins were uneven. My name was spelled correctly, but the project description was vague, like someone had typed it quickly after the fact. At the bottom was my signature, or something pretending to be my signature. The more I looked at it, the stranger it felt. It looked too clean, not like a pen dragged across paper, not like something signed naturally on a job site. It looked like an image placed on top of the document. I did not know how to prove that yet, but I knew what my own signature felt like. This one had the same shape as the signature from the original contract, but it sat on the page too perfectly, like a sticker. I pulled up the original contract and placed both signatures side by side on my screen. My stomach tightened. They were almost identical, not similar. Identical in a way real signatures almost never are. The same curve, the same pressure pattern, the same tiny upward flick at the end. It looked like someone had copied my signature from the first document and pasted it onto the second. That was when fear turned into anger. Not loud anger. Not the kind that makes you throw things or fire off emotional texts. It was colder than that, because I realized this was not just a bad contractor trying to avoid blame. This was someone who may have created paperwork to make me responsible for his own illegal work. The next morning, I called the county permit office. I expected to sit on hold forever, but a woman answered after a few minutes. I gave her my address, the permit number from the PDF, and the project description. I tried to keep my voice steady. She typed for a while. Then she said, "I don't show any active retaining wall permit for your property." I asked if maybe it was filed under the contractor's name. She checked again. Nothing. Then I read her the permit number from the PDF. There was a pause. She said that number did exist, but it was not connected to my address. It belonged to a small commercial repair project in another part of the county. Different property, different applicant, different scope of work. For a moment, I just stared at the wall in my kitchen like the room had gone silent around me. Then I asked her if she could email me confirmation that no permit had been issued for my address. She said she could not give legal advice, but she could send a public records response showing what was on file. By the end of the day, I had an email from the county confirming there was no issued permit for my retaining wall. I printed it. Then I saved it in the county folder. After that, I searched the state contractor licensing website. His license was real, which almost made it worse, because it explained why I had trusted him. But under the complaint history, I found 2 prior disputes. One involved unfinished work after a failed inspection. The other mentioned a disagreement over who was responsible for permits. My hands went cold when I read that. This was not his first time. I took screenshots of the license page, the complaint summaries, and the insurance information listed under his company profile. Then I called an independent structural engineer. I did not ask him to take my side. I asked him to inspect the wall and tell me the truth. He came out 2 days later. He was quiet, older, and serious in the way people get when they have seen too many expensive mistakes. He walked the length of the wall, scraped away loose soil, looked behind the blocks, checked the drainage, and measured the height. He did not say much at first, which made me even more nervous. Finally, he stood back and said, "This should not have been built this way." He explained that the wall needed proper gravel backfill, drainage outlet placement, and depending on height and local requirements, engineered plans before construction. He said water pressure behind a retaining wall is not cosmetic, it is structural. If water has nowhere to go, the wall can shift, crack, or fail. Then he pointed toward the rear property line. If this drains into your neighbor's yard, that's another problem. I hired a surveyor next. The surveyor found that the wall had been placed closer to the property line than the preliminary drawing my contractor had emailed me. The difference was not huge to the naked eye, but in county code and HOA disputes, inches can become thousands of dollars. The surveyor marked the line with flags, took measurements, and prepared a written report. By then, my evidence folder was no longer just a folder. It was a timeline. The contract said he handled permits. The email said he handled HOA coordination. The permit office said no permit existed for my address. The PDF he gave me matched another property. The camera placed him in my backyard after dark. The audio caught him saying he would clean up the permit issue. The engineer found unsafe construction. The surveyor found placement problems. And the change order looked like it had been built around a copied signature. I also went through every text message. There were no messages where I asked him to skip permits. No messages where I told him to start early without approval. No messages where I accepted responsibility for county filing. In fact, there were multiple messages where I asked him whether everything was approved, and each time, he told me he had it handled. The clearest one was from the week before construction began. I had written, "Are we good on HOA and permit before you start?" He replied, "Yes, we handle all permitting and HOA coordination. You're covered." I took a screenshot of that message and stared at it for a long time. You're covered. That was what he had sold me. Not just a wall, protection, expertise, peace of mind. And now he was trying to use fake paperwork to turn that promise into my liability. By the end of the week, I had stopped answering his calls. I only communicated by email. When he demanded another payment to resolve the mess I created, I replied with one sentence, "Please send all future communication in writing." He did not like that. His next email was longer, angrier, and full of threats. He said he would place a mechanic's lien on my house. He said the HOA would come after me. He said the county would not care about my excuses. He said I had signed the change order and should stop pretending otherwise. But this time, his confidence did not scare me. It helped me. Because every threat he typed became another piece of evidence. Every false claim gave me something specific to disprove. Every angry email showed that he was not trying to fix the wall. He was trying to control the story. and he had no idea I was about to take that story to someone who knew exactly how to read it. The person I took the evidence to was a construction attorney whose office sat above a small title company near the county courthouse. I expected him to be shocked. He was not. He listened quietly while I explained the retaining wall, the red tag, the HOA warning, the strange permit PDF, the copied-looking signature, and the camera footage from the night before inspection. He did not interrupt me. He did not make big dramatic faces. He just took notes on a yellow legal pad and occasionally asked for dates. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and said, "The wall is one problem. The paperwork may be a much bigger problem." That sentence stayed with me. Until then, I had been focused on the physical damage. The mud, the drainage, the setback, the threat of county fines, the possibility that I would have to pay thousands of dollars to tear out a wall I had already paid for. But the attorney saw the shape of something else. He saw a contractor trying to create a paper trail after the fact. He asked me to send him the original contract, the permit PDF, the change order, the HOA emails, the text messages, the county response, the engineer's preliminary notes, the surveyor's markings, and the camera clips. Then he told me not to call the contractor again, not once, not even to defend myself. From this point forward, he said, everything goes through writing. 2 days later, the contractor received a demand letter. It was not emotional. It did not call him names. It did not accuse him in the wild, angry way I wanted to accuse him. It simply laid out facts. The contract stated he was responsible for permits. His own text message said he handled all permitting and HOA coordination. The county had no permit issued for my address. The document he gave me appeared inconsistent with public records. The change order was disputed. The construction had failed inspection. The wall had potential safety and drainage defects. Then the letter demanded that he provide the complete permit application package, all county correspondence, all HOA submissions, the original signed change order, proof that I had agreed to take responsibility for permits, and his insurance information. His response came fast, too fast. He sent a long email full of outrage, acting like he had been personally betrayed. He said I was trying to avoid paying for my own decisions. He said I had approved everything verbally. He said the HOA was only involved because I had made the project more public than necessary. He said the county inspector was known for being difficult, and then he attached the same permit again. That was his first mistake. The attorney forwarded that permit directly to the county inspector and asked one simple question: is this an authentic permit issued for this property and this project? The answer came back the next morning. No. The inspector explained that the permit number belonged to a different property. The project description did not match the official record. The format of the document was wrong. Even the county stamp on the PDF was outdated. It was a version the department had stopped using the year before, after switching to a newer digital permitting system. When I read that email, I felt my chest tighten. Not because I was scared anymore, because the ground had finally shifted under him. For days, he had made me feel like I was the careless homeowner, the person who did not understand rules, the person who had caused trouble for everyone else. But now the county itself was saying the document he gave me was not what he claimed it was. Then came the second mistake. The attorney asked me to forward the original files exactly as I received them, not screenshots, not renamed copies, not printed scans. He wanted the PDFs as attachments from the contractor's original email. I found them and sent them over. A few hours later, he called me. His voice was calm but different. He said, "The metadata on the change order is going to be a problem for him. The contractor had claimed I signed that change order before construction began. According to his story, I had agreed from the beginning to handle the permit myself, but the PDF metadata showed the file had been created after the county red tag was issued. After. Not before the work started. Not before the inspection. Not before the supposed agreement. After he had already been caught. And the signature, the one that looked exactly like mine, was embedded as an image layer. It was not a verified electronic signature. It was not part of a scanned full-page original. It appeared to have been placed into the document separately. The attorney did not say the word forgery lightly, but he did say, "This is no longer just a dispute over workmanship." That changed the entire case. The contractor's confidence had depended on confusion. He needed the HOA to believe I had skipped the rules. He needed the county to see me as the responsible owner. He needed me to panic before I realized the permit number was wrong. He needed that change order to look real long enough to force me into paying him again. But now every piece of his story had a date attached to it. The contract came first. Then my text asking whether the HOA and permit were approved. Then his reply saying I was covered. Then the construction. Then the failed inspection. Then the red tag. Then the file creation date on the so-called change order. The timeline did not bend in his favor. It broke him. The attorney sent a second letter, sharper than the first. This one included the county's written confirmation, the public record mismatch, the metadata issue, the disputed signature, the engineer's safety concerns, and the camera footage showing him entering my backyard after hours before the inspection. He was given one chance to notify his insurer, preserve all project records, and stop communicating false claims to the HOA. He did the opposite. He wrote to the HOA board again and tried to double down. He told them I was creating a legal distraction to avoid responsibility for an illegal wall. He said he had documentation proving I authorized everything. He said I was damaging his business reputation, but this time the HOA did not answer him the way he expected. Because my attorney had already sent the board the original contract, the county confirmation, and the text message where the contractor said he handled all permitting and HOA coordination. The board president, who had been ready to fine me days earlier, suddenly wanted a special meeting, and that was when the county inspector agreed to attend. When my attorney told me that, I sat in my car outside the grocery store for almost 10 minutes, just breathing. For the first time since the red tag appeared, I understood what was happening. The contractor had built the wall wrong. Then he had tried to build a lie around it. But lies are like bad retaining walls. If there is no foundation, no drainage, and too much pressure behind them, they eventually fail. His was about to fail in front of everyone. The special HOA meeting was held on a Thursday evening in the community clubhouse. I had been inside that room many times before, but never like that. Usually it smelled like coffee, printer paper, and whatever cookies someone had brought from the grocery store. There were folding chairs lined up in rows, a long table at the front for the board, and a bulletin board near the door covered with pool rules, landscaping reminders, and notices about holiday trash pickup. That night the room felt colder. My contractor was already there when I arrived. He sat near the front with his arms stretched across the backs of two chairs, looking completely relaxed. He had brought a thick folder, the kind people bring when they want everyone to believe they are prepared. The HOA president sat at the table with the property manager on one side and two board members on the other. My rear neighbor was there too, sitting stiffly with his phone in his hand, probably ready to record if things got heated. Then my attorney walked in. The contractor's expression changed just a little, not enough for most people to notice, but I noticed. His smile tightened. His shoulders came forward. His eyes moved from my attorney's briefcase to the stack of documents in my hands, and for the first time since the red tag appeared, he did not look completely in control. The HOA president opened the meeting by saying the purpose was to address an unapproved retaining wall, drainage complaints, and possible violations of the association's architectural rules. She spoke in the firm, official voice HOA board members use when they think the decision has already been made. Then she looked at me and said the board had authority to impose fines if the matter was not corrected immediately. Before I could answer, my attorney stood up. He did not raise his voice. He did not argue. He simply placed a binder on the table and said, "Before the board considers penalties against my client, you need to review the actual record." That was the first time the room went quiet. He started with the contract. Page 1 showed the contractor's company name, license number, scope of work, and payment terms. Page 2 contained the permit clause. My attorney read it out loud. Contractor responsible for all permits unless otherwise stated in writing. Then he placed my text messages behind it. The one where I asked whether HOA and permit approval were complete before construction started. The contractor's answer was highlighted. "Yes, we handle all permitting and HOA coordination. You're covered." The HOA president leaned forward. The property manager stopped typing. My contractor shifted in his chair and said, "That's being taken out of context." My attorney did not respond to him directly. He moved to the next document. It was the county permit office confirmation. No retaining wall permit had been issued for my property. No application was pending under my address. No inspection had been approved before construction. The permit number on the PDF the contractor gave me belonged to a different project at a different address. Then the clubhouse door opened. The county inspector walked in. He was still wearing his county badge clipped to his shirt pocket, and the moment people recognized him, the atmosphere changed completely. What had started as an HOA discipline meeting no longer felt like neighbors arguing over a backyard project. It felt like a record was being built. The inspector introduced himself and explained that he was there only to clarify the county's findings. He said the retaining wall had been red tagged because it lacked a valid permit, raised structural concerns, appeared to violate setback requirements, and did not show compliant drainage. He made it clear that the county was not relying on rumor, HOA politics, or anyone's personal version of events. It was relying on records, measurements, and inspection findings. Then he addressed the permit PDF. He said the document provided by the contractor did not match the county's official system. The number was real, but it was not for my property. The stamp format was outdated. The project type was wrong. The county had no record showing that document had ever been issued for my retaining wall. My contractor tried to interrupt. He said, "This is a paperwork misunderstanding." The homeowner knew we were moving fast. The inspector looked at him and said, "The county does not approve construction through verbal understandings." That one sentence landed harder than any argument I could have made. For weeks, my contractor had survived by talking over me, talking around the HOA, talking like confidence was the same thing as evidence. But in that room, in front of the board, the inspector, my attorney, my neighbor, and the property manager, talking finally stopped working. My attorney continued. He showed the engineer's report, explaining that the wall had been built without proper drainage support and might need removal before it could be rebuilt safely. He showed the surveyor's measurements, which confirmed the wall was too close to the property line compared with the contractor's own drawing. Then he described the camera footage showing the contractor entering my backyard after dark before the inspection, moving materials near the drainage area, and saying on a phone call that he would clean up the permit issue if anyone asked. The rear neighbor lowered his phone. One of the board members whispered something to the HOA president. The contractor's face turned red. He stood up and said I was trying to destroy his company. He said homeowners like me always wanted perfect work for cheap prices. He said attorneys could make anything look suspicious. He said the HOA should be careful before taking my side because I was still the property owner and the wall was still in my yard. And technically, that last part was true. The wall was in my yard. The red tag was on my property. The county notices came to me because I owned the house. But for the first time, everyone in that room understood the difference between being the owner of the property and being the person who created the violation. My attorney looked at the board and said, "My client hired a licensed contractor specifically to avoid this situation." The contractor represented in writing that he handled permitting and HOA coordination. He then provided a document the county has now confirmed does not correspond to this property. The association may need the wall corrected, but punishing the homeowner for relying on false contractor representations would only create another dispute. The HOA president did not answer right away. She looked at the property manager. The property manager looked at the inspector. The inspector looked at his notes. Then the president said the board would suspend all fines against me pending further review. My contractor snapped, "You're rewarding her for violating the rules." The HOA president turned toward him and said, "No, we are verifying the record before we assign blame. For a person like him, that was the worst possible outcome, because his entire defense depended on blame being assigned quickly, emotionally, and publicly. He needed the HOA to fine me before they looked too closely. He needed my neighbor angry enough to pressure me. He needed the county process to feel so expensive that I would pay him to make it disappear. Instead, the issue had become formal. The county inspector said the violation file would remain open and that any correction would require proper plans, permit review, and inspection. He also said the permit document issue would be referred to the appropriate licensing authorities because the county could not ignore a permit being represented as valid when it was not. My attorney then requested the contractor's insurance information again, on the record. This time, he could not brush it off. The property manager asked whether the HOA should also submit the documents to its legal counsel. My attorney said that would be appropriate. The inspector said the county's findings would be available through public records. My rear neighbor, who had arrived angry at me, asked whether the drainage damage in his yard should be documented through insurance. The contractor sat back down. He was not silent because he had nothing to say. People like that always have something to say. He was silent because the room had changed languages. It no longer spoke in intimidation, excuses, or confident lies. It spoke in contracts, timestamps, inspection notes, permit records, survey flags, insurance claims, and official referrals. And he was not fluent in that language anymore. By the end of the meeting, the HOA had agreed to hold off on penalties against me. The county required the wall to remain untouched until a proper corrective plan was submitted. My attorney prepared a formal claim against the contractor's insurance for defective work, misrepresentation, professional negligence, and the cost of restoring the property. The neighbor behind me agreed to let the engineer document the runoff damage instead of blaming me personally. I walked out of the clubhouse under the yellow porch light feeling exhausted, but not helpless. My contractor followed a few steps behind, no longer smiling. At the edge of the parking lot, he said, "You have no idea how expensive this is going to get." I looked at him for a moment and realized he was right. I did not know yet how expensive it would get. But for the first time, I knew I was not going to be the only one paying for it. 3 weeks later, an email arrived from the State Contractor Licensing Board. The subject line said, "Formal complaint accepted for investigation." The investigation did not end quickly, but it ended cleanly. That was the part my contractor never expected. He had built his entire strategy around pressure. Pressure from the HOA, pressure from the county, pressure from my neighbor, pressure from the cost of demolition, legal fees, engineering reports, and the fear that a red tag on my own property would somehow make me responsible for everything he had done wrong. But pressure only works when the truth has nowhere to drain. Mine did. After the licensing board accepted the complaint, my attorney sent a full evidence package to the contractor's insurance carrier. It included the contract, the county confirmation, the false permit PDF, the disputed change order, the camera footage, the engineer's report, the surveyor's report, the HOA correspondence, and every email where the contractor tried to blame me. At first, his insurance company moved slowly. Then the county's referral and the licensing board complaint changed the tone. Suddenly, they wanted statements. They wanted photos. They wanted inspection notes. They wanted the original documents, not the contractor's summaries of what he claimed had happened. That was where he lost control. Because summaries can be twisted, original records cannot. The HOA officially canceled every fine against me. They sent a letter stating that, based on the documentation provided, there was not enough evidence to show I had knowingly violated the architectural rules or intentionally bypassed the permit process. They still required the wall to be corrected, but they stopped treating me like the person who had caused the violation. That letter meant more to me than I expected. Not because I cared about winning an argument with the HOA, but because for weeks I had walked through my neighborhood feeling like everyone saw me as the careless homeowner who put other properties at risk. That letter did not erase the stress, but it gave the truth a place to stand. The county required the old wall to come down. There was no saving it. The engineer explained that trying to patch bad drainage, questionable footing, and setback problems would cost more in the long run than starting over correctly. So the defective wall was dismantled block by block under a proper corrective permit. This time, every step was documented, every measurement was checked, every inspection was scheduled through the county system where I could see it myself. The contractor who caused the problem was not allowed back on my property. His insurance carrier eventually agreed to cover most of the damage-related costs: demolition, debris removal, grading repair, part of the engineering review, and the cost difference required to rebuild the wall safely and legally. It did not happen with one magical check in the mail. It took letters, estimates, revisions, and patience. But it happened. The new retaining wall was lower, stronger, and set where it actually belonged. It had proper drainage behind it, clean gravel backfill, a visible outlet, county-approved plans, and final inspection sign-off. The survey flags came out. The mud stopped washing into my neighbor's yard, The HOA received proof of compliance. For the first time in months, my backyard looked like a backyard again, instead of a case file. The licensing board's decision came later. My contractor was fined and placed under disciplinary review. His ability to pull certain permits was restricted while the board investigated the false document issue and the prior complaints connected to permit disputes. I do not know every private consequence he faced, and honestly, I did not need to. What I do know is that his name stopped appearing on the HOA's recommended vendor list, and 2 neighbors later told me they canceled planned projects with his company after hearing what happened at the meeting. That may have been the part that bothered him most. Not the fine, not the insurance claim, the loss of easy trust. Because people like him survive when homeowners assume confidence equals competence. They survive when nobody checks the permit number, nobody reads the contract twice, nobody saves the text message, and nobody asks the county clerk one simple question: is this real? A few months after the new wall passed final inspection, I replanted my mother's hydrangeas along the back edge of the yard. The soil was fresh, the slope was stable, the fence line was clean. I remember standing there with dirt on my hands, hearing traffic faintly beyond the neighborhood, and feeling something I had not felt since the red tag appeared. Peace, not victory in the loud, dramatic way people imagine it. Just peace. The kind that comes when the thing someone tried to take from you is finally back where it belongs. I did not beat that contractor by yelling louder than him. I did not threaten him in a parking lot. I did not sneak onto his property or try to ruin him with rumors. I did not need revenge that would make me look like the problem. I kept the contract. I saved the emails. I checked the public records. I downloaded the camera footage. I hired the right professionals. And I let the facts walk into every room he thought he could talk his way out of. That was the lesson I carried from the whole mess. Property rights are not just about fences, walls, driveways, and boundary lines. They are about records, dates, signatures, permits, surveys, inspection notes. The quiet paperwork people ignore until someone arrogant tries to rewrite reality. So if a contractor, HOA board member, developer, or neighbor ever tells you not to worry because they have everything handled, do not just listen to how confident they sound. Ask for the document, check the number, save the message. Because the person who protects the evidence protects the truth. And sometimes, the truth is the only wall strong enough to hold back someone else's lie. If this story made you think of a contractor, HOA, or neighbor who tried to use pressure instead of proof, share your thoughts in the comments. Share this story with someone who owns a home, plans to hire a contractor, or has ever been told to, just trust me. And subscribe to hear more property drama stories where the loudest person in the room does not win. The person with the records does.